I really don't think there's something that distinguishes Dial of Destiny from all the other films. I think there's a continuum. The whole film is about time.
At 70, Harrison Ford wasn't supposed to be dodging boulders or cracking a whip anymore. At least, that's what Hollywood insiders thought.
Anything could happen. It's a long way to Delhi.
No, thanks. No more adventures with you, Dr. Jones.
The man who gave us the most rugged archaeologist in cinematic history had already flown the Millennium Falcon.
Where's our boosters?
Saved presidents and outrun villains twice his age. But when whispers started swirling about his future as Indiana Jones, fans leaned in. Was Ford finally hanging up the fedora? Or was there one last treasure hunt tucked up his sleeve? The suspense only grew as Ford, ever the master of understatement, sidestepped the question for years. Studios stayed quiet. Co-stars offered knowing smiles. And fans, they speculated wildly. Sometimes with hope, sometimes with dread. After all, how long can a hero outrun both Nazis and Father Time? The answer was always just out of reach, until now. For decades, fans whispered about it. Was he done with Indiana Jones? Would there be another film? At 70, Harrison Ford finally confirmed the rumors, and it was the answer no one expected. The Legend of Indiana Jones.
And you're just too proud to admit that you're crazy about me, Dr. Jones.
If you want me, Willie.
In the summer of 1981, audiences filed into theaters expecting another fun popcorn flick from the makers of Star Wars and Jaws. What they got instead was lightning in a bottle, the birth of one of cinema's most enduring heroes, Indiana Jones. From the very first crack of his bullwhip in Raiders of the Lost Ark, Harrison Ford didn't just play a character, he embodied an idea. He wasn't a flawless superhero in spandex. He was a rugged, dirt-smudged archaeologist who could get bruised, banged up, and still come out on top. Indy made clumsiness look cool, fear look funny, and danger look irresistible. With his fedora tipped low and his wry smile flashing in the middle of chaos.
Nice try, Lao She.
He became the kind of hero you wanted to follow into a snake pit, even if you hated snakes. The brilliance of Raiders was that it didn't just entertain, it redefined adventure movies. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas pulled from the old pulp serials of the 1930s and 40s. Those cliffhanger-filled Saturday matinees that once had kids glued to their seats. But in Ford, they found the perfect vehicle to modernize that nostalgia. He wasn't polished like James Bond, or invincible like Superman. Indiana Jones bled, sweated, and muttered sarcastic one-liners in between punches. He was every man and myth all at once. The impact was immediate. Raiders of the Lost Ark wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural earthquake. Suddenly, adventure films had a new gold standard. The globe-trotting chases, the ancient traps, the dusty tombs hiding unthinkable treasures all became staples of a genre reborn. Hollywood scrambled to imitate it, but no one could replicate the magic formula. Spielberg's flair for spectacle, Lucas's storytelling instincts, John Williams's soaring score, and Ford's inescapable charisma. And oh, that charisma. Harrison Ford was already known as Han Solo, the cocky smuggler with a heart of gold. But Indiana Jones allowed him to stretch differently.
It's a thuggy ceremony. They're worshiping Kali.
Han was reckless, charming, and a little selfish. Indy was intelligent, principled, and just unlucky enough to keep life interesting. The fedora and whip transformed him into a global icon, but it was Ford's weary half-smile, the look of a man asking, "Why me?" As a giant boulder barrels toward him, that made audiences fall in love. He wasn't a god among mortals, he was a mortal among gods, doing his best to keep up. By the time the sequels rolled out, Temple of Doom in 1984, The Last Crusade in 1989, Indiana Jones wasn't just a character, he was an institution. Fans lined up not just for the spectacle, but to see Ford himself slip into the role like a perfectly worn leather jacket. In an era dominated by muscle-bound action heroes like Schwarzenegger and Stallone, Ford carved out something more human. He made it okay for a hero to groan when he got punched or looked tired after a chase. That humanity was his superpower. The franchise didn't just shape adventure cinema, it reshaped pop culture itself. Parodies popped up everywhere, from cartoons to sitcoms. Halloween stores couldn't keep up with the demand for whips and fedoras. Even archaeologists reported a surge of young students who confessed that Indiana Jones inspired them to study history. That's right, fictional tomb raiding actually boosted real-world enrollment. Not many movie heroes can say they fueled both box office records and university applications. And then there was the music. John Williams' score, with its triumphant brass fanfare, became as recognizable as Indy's whip. Play those first few notes anywhere in the world.
The great maestro, John Williams.
And you'll see smiles spread and eyes widen. It wasn't just a theme. It was a promise of adventure, of danger, of fun. Fans weren't just watching Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, they were adopting him into their lives. For kids, he was a role model of bravery and wit. For adults, he was a reminder that heroes don't have to be perfect. They just have to keep going. Ford himself joked in interviews that Indy was a hero with a hangover. That relatability made audiences root for him harder. And let's not forget the humor. The Indiana Jones films walked a tightrope between suspense and comedy. 1 second, Indy was staring down hundreds of swordsmen, and the next, he casually shot one with his revolver, a gag that came from Ford's real-life stomach bug on set. Those moments of improvisation turned into legendary bits of cinematic history.
Crazy!
Molaram, here to meet Khalid. In hell.
Fans didn't just remember the stunts, they remembered the smirks, the shrugs, and the muttering, "I hate snakes." As the decades rolled on, Indy grew into something larger than life. He became shorthand for adventure itself. When filmmakers pitched new stories, they'd call them the next Indiana Jones. Theme parks built rides in his honor. Video games, comic books, and novels expanded his world. And through it all, Ford stood at the center. Gruff, reluctant, but irreplaceable. That irreplaceability is what made the rumors sting so much. Whenever whispers emerged about Ford stepping away, fans panicked. Could anyone else truly wear the fedora? Hollywood tried hinting at successors, but audiences weren't buying it. Indy without Ford wasn't Indy at all. Just as Sean Connery defined James Bond for a generation, Harrison Ford defined Indiana Jones for all time. He wasn't just playing a role, he was the role. The cultural bond between Ford and Indy became unshakable. By the time Ford turned 70, every rumor about the franchise made headlines. Would there be another sequel? Would someone else take over? Would Indy finally ride off into the sunset for good? Fans argued, debated, and theorized endlessly. The world could survive without new adventures, perhaps. But could it survive without knowing what Harrison Ford thought about Indiana Jones's fate? That's why every rumor about Indiana Jones hit like breaking news. The rumors begin. The legend of Indiana Jones was secure by the time the credits rolled on The Last Crusade in 1989. Indy had saved the day, patched things up with his father, and literally ridden into the sunset. It felt like the perfect ending, tidy, triumphant, and final. But Hollywood, like Indy himself, has a habit of poking around in places best left alone. Fast forward nearly 20 years, and in 2008, Harrison Ford dusted off the fedora once again for Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Fans rushed to theaters, eager to see their beloved hero back in action. And at first, there was nostalgia magic, that grin, that whip, that familiar John Williams fanfare. But soon came the aliens, the CGI, and most notoriously, the refrigerator scene. Yes, Indiana Jones survived a nuclear blast by hiding inside a lead-lined fridge, and audiences never quite let him live it down. The film made money, sure, but the whispers started almost immediately. Was this really how Indy should have ended? Was Ford too old for the role now? Had the fedora been worn one too many times? To many fans, Crystal Skull felt less like a swashbuckling finale and more like a hazy reunion tour. The man who once punched Nazis and dodged rolling boulders was now wrestling with aliens and swinging from trees with Shia LaBeouf. Rumor mills don't need much fuel, and Ford at 66 provided plenty. Maybe he's done, fans muttered. Blogs speculated. Studio insiders whispered about moving on. Could Indy's whip really be hung up for good? Then came the more dangerous whispers, the kind that cut deep. What if someone else took over? By 2014, Hollywood gossip sites were buzzing. Chris Pratt's name shot to the top of the list, riding high after Guardians of the Galaxy. Suddenly, everyone imagined a smirking, athletic, younger Indy cracking the whip. Headlines screamed things like, "Pratt to replace Ford?" And fans nearly choked on their popcorn. Twitter wars erupted. Message boards lit up. Memes flooded the internet. To some, the idea sounded fresh and exciting. To others, it was nothing short of sacrilege. Think about it. Replacing Ford as Indy would be like swapping out Santa Claus on Christmas Eve. Sure, someone else could put on the red suit, but kids would notice immediately. Harrison Ford wasn't playing a role. He was Indiana Jones. The fedora wasn't a costume. It was an extension of his very being. Every smirk, every grunt, every weary, "It's not the years, honey, it's the mileage." Those were Ford's fingerprints on the character. Yet Hollywood loves a reboot, and executives couldn't resist testing the waters. Would audiences accept a younger man stepping into Indy's dusty boots? The debate grew louder, almost as thrilling as the movies themselves.
Well, these Arabs don't care if we kill each other. They're not going to interfere in our business.
It was not I who brought the girl into this business.
Ford, meanwhile, seemed both amused and annoyed. Asked in interviews about Pratt or anyone else donning the fedora, he gave that trademark half-smile and said bluntly, "When I'm gone, he's gone." It's that simple. Fans cheered. Studios groaned. And the rumors only grew louder. Could Indiana Jones exist without Harrison Ford? That was the question that kept everyone talking. Some argued, yes, after all, James Bond had been reimagined countless times. Why not Indy? He could be younger, faster, more in tune with a modern generation. Maybe audiences wanted a millennial archaeologist who live-streamed his adventures or carried a drone in his satchel. Others shuddered at the thought. Indy wasn't a rotating archetype like Bond. He was a singular creation, bound inseparably to Ford's gruff charm. Even within the fan community, theories splintered. Some said the only acceptable way forward was through a passing of the torch, maybe with Indy mentoring a younger protege. Others wanted the role retired entirely. Better no Indy than a fake one. And then there were the dreamers, convinced Ford still had another bullwhip crack left in him. Age be damned, they wanted their Indy back. Through it all, Ford stayed coy, refusing to give a straight answer. He'd joke about his knees or his back, then show up on set for Star Wars, The Force Awakens, and prove he could still command the screen. That only made the speculation juicier. If he could return as Han Solo in his 70s, why not Indy? But if Crystal Skull had already tested fans' patience, could another sequel survive? Every year, new scoops appeared online. Anonymous sources claimed Ford was done. Others insisted scripts were being written. Directors were attached, then detached. Chris Pratt's name came back, then faded away. Bradley Cooper was floated. Even Robert Pattinson's name got tossed in, though nobody could quite picture Indy sparkling in the sun.
Clocks won't be invented for 1,000 years, much less watches.
The rumors weren't just background noise, they were events in themselves. Entertainment magazines ran cover stories. Talk shows teased Ford for answers, and fans dissected every photo of him with Spielberg or Lucas as though they were analyzing clues to a treasure map. Was he holding a script? Was that a knowing smile? Could Indy really ride again? It became clear Indiana Jones wasn't just a movie hero anymore. He was a cultural inheritance. People didn't just want another film. They wanted reassurance that their hero wasn't gone for good. And in the absence of answers, the speculation filled the void. That's the magic and the curse of a character like Indy. He didn't just belong to Hollywood. He belonged to everyone who'd ever hummed the theme song or mimicked cracking a whip with a jump rope. Harrison Ford may have created him, but fans around the world felt they owned a piece too. That's why every whisper about Ford's future carried such weight. Would Indy continue with a new face? Could Ford keep going, defying both critics and his own aching bones? Or had the final sunset already come and gone? The only thing certain was this: Indiana Jones without Harrison Ford wasn't just a casting choice. It was a cultural gamble, and that's why fans kept asking the one question no rumor could ever answer. Could Indiana Jones exist without Harrison Ford? Harrison Ford breaks his silence. For years, the whispers circled like vultures over an ancient dig site. Fans argued, studios plotted, and journalists prodded. Harrison Ford, as usual, played his cards close to the vest, offering nothing more than a smirk and a grumble when asked about Indiana Jones. But then came the turning point. At 70 years old, Ford sat down for a series of interviews, and finally, the man behind the fedora decided to set the record straight. With the kind of bluntness only Ford can deliver, he dropped the line that silenced the noise. "When I'm gone, he's gone. This is my character. No hedging, no Hollywood spin, just raw honesty. Indiana Jones," he declared, "would not be recast, rebooted, or remixed. There would be no next generation Indy, no replacement fedora passed to a younger face. Ford was planting the flag. The legend begins and ends with him. The effect was seismic. For fans who had been wringing their hands over Chris Pratt, Bradley Cooper, or any other rumored successor, Ford's words felt like a thunderclap of relief. The man himself was saying what they'd been shouting all along. You cannot separate Indiana Jones from Harrison Ford. They are one and the same. But not everyone celebrated. Hollywood executives, forever hungry for franchises that print money, groaned. Imagine the billions they could make rebooting Indiana Jones for a new generation. Ford's declaration was essentially locking the treasure chest and tossing the key into the snake pit. For them, it was less of a whip crack and more of a whip slap. Fans, however, couldn't get enough. Social media lit up with memes and cheers. One tweet summed it up perfectly. Indiana Jones is Harrison Ford. End of story. Thanks for playing. Another quipped, you can't reboot perfection. Ford's fedora or bust. The loyalty to Ford was almost religious. His words felt like scripture. And Ford, in his typical fashion, didn't elaborate much.
Preparation whatsoever. I didn't even know what the names of the major motion picture studios were. And about a year and a half later, I was...
He wasn't trying to stir drama or make headlines. He was simply stating what seemed obvious to him. To Ford, Indy wasn't a corporate property to be handed down like a baton. He was flesh and blood, a character born from his own quirks, humor and grit. The crooked smile, the exasperated mutterings, the subtle vulnerability beneath the swagger, that wasn't written into the script. That was Ford. And that, he insisted, could never be imitated. It's rare in Hollywood for an actor to slam the brakes on a potential goldmine. Studios love to milk franchises until the udders run dry. But Ford wasn't interested in seeing Indiana Jones become a pale imitation of itself. He'd already watched the character navigate aliens and refrigerators. He wasn't about to watch him get cheapened further by a reboot. To him, Indy deserved better. The reactions also sparked heated debates. Some critics argued Ford was being too possessive. Shouldn't great characters outlive the actors who play them? After all, Sherlock Holmes, Batman, and James Bond have thrived under countless interpretations. Why should Indiana Jones be any different? But fans pushed back with a simple counterpoint. Those characters were archetypes. Indy wasn't. He was built from the ground up with Ford's fingerprints all over him.
It's a phoenix. Common icon.
Look, it isn't.
To strip Ford from the role would be to strip Indy of his soul. And so, with a single line, the actor reshaped the conversation. What had once been endless speculation turned into certainty. The rumors weren't idle chatter anymore. They weren't fan theories or internet noise. They were facts, delivered straight from the man himself. The rumors weren't just speculation. They were true. Ford himself said Indiana Jones would live and die with him. The final adventure. When the veteran actor drew a line in the sand and declared that Indiana Jones would not outlive him, fans felt both relieved and uneasy. Relieved because the character wouldn't be reduced to a hollow imitation, but uneasy because it meant the clock was ticking. If Indy were to ride again, it would be Ford's last hurrah. And in 2023, that final ride came with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. By then, Ford was in his late 70s, an age when most men are content with golf clubs, crossword puzzles, and early bird specials. But not Harrison Ford. He strapped on the fedora, cracked the whip one more time, and hurled himself headfirst into a globe-trotting adventure. Watching him step onto the screen again was like seeing an old friend walk through the door. The years were visible, sure, but the spark was undeniable. The sheer fact that Ford performed many of his own stunts at that age was enough to make jaws drop. At 70, most actors might opt for body doubles and green screens. Ford, he was out there riding horses, sprinting across train cars, and hurling himself into fight sequences that would exhaust men half his age. There were reports of him injuring his shoulder during filming.
The 78-year-old suffered a shoulder injury while he was rehearsing a fight scene.
A reminder that Indy's most dangerous foe had always been time. Yet every bruise, every scar seemed to underline his commitment. This wasn't just a paycheck gig, it was a farewell love letter. The film itself leaned into that sense of finality. Indy was older and wearier, a man haunted by the passage of time. But that humanity had always been his greatest weapon. While other action heroes age into caricatures, Ford let Indy grow with him. His steps were slower, his punches heavier, but his spirit, the stubborn refusal to quit, remained unbreakable. Audiences couldn't help but marvel. It wasn't just that Ford was doing these stunts, it was that he insisted on doing them. He knew the audience came for the authenticity, the sense that Indy's sweat and grunts were real, and in true Ford fashion, he gave them nothing less. It was as if he were daring Father Time himself to keep up. Of course, modern technology lent a hand. The film opened with a flashback sequence featuring a de-aged Ford, whisking viewers back to Indy's World War II glory days. For a moment, fans saw the young adventurer again, dodging Nazis with youthful vigor. But once the flashback ended, there he was, older, tougher, and undeniably human. It was a clever reminder that time spares no one, not even our heroes. And yet, it also underscored Ford's earlier point. You can recreate his face with CGI, but you cannot recreate him. The release of Dial of Destiny was more than just another summer blockbuster. It was a cultural event. Audiences packed theaters not just to see Indy's latest adventure, but to witness history, the final chapter of a legend 4 decades in the making. Fans laughed, cried, and cheered, knowing each bullwhip crack might be the last. For many, it felt like closing a book they'd been reading since childhood. Ford himself made it clear in interviews, this was it. No more speculation, no more rumors. The hat and whip would not be passed down to another actor. nor dusted off for another sequel. He was saying goodbye on his terms, in his way. I wanted to see him at the end of his career, at the end of his journey, Ford explained. It was important to me to finish the story. And that's what made the film so powerful. It wasn't about reliving the past or recapturing the magic of Raiders. It was about closure, about letting the character grow old gracefully, rather than endlessly rebooting him into irrelevance.
About to hear what the graphical says. They're not gonna hurt him.
Indy didn't need to live forever on screen. He had already lived forever in the hearts of fans. The reactions were mixed, as they always are. Some critics focused on the film's pacing or its ambitious plot, but even skeptics admitted one thing: Harrison Ford was the beating heart of it all. Strip him out, and Dial of Destiny collapses. With him, it had weight, warmth, and authenticity. He carried Indy to the finish line the only way he knew how, through grit, humor, and sheer determination. In the end, fans weren't just watching a movie. They were witnessing a farewell performance, a curtain call from a legend who gave everything he had to the role. As the credits rolled, audiences felt both gratitude and grief. Gratitude that Ford had returned one last time, and grief that they'd never see him don the fedora again. Because this time, the whispers were over. The rumors had finally met their end. Harrison Ford had spoken, and his final performance as Indiana Jones was proof written in sweat and scars.
Feeling helpful now?
At 70, he confirmed the rumors fans dreaded. The hat and whip would be retired with him. The legacy he leaves behind. By the time Harrison Ford hung up the whip for good, it was clear that his contribution wasn't just to a single franchise. It was to the entire adventure genre itself. Before Indiana Jones, adventure movies often leaned on campy tropes, predictable heroes, and exaggerated theatrics. After Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981, everything changed. Filmmakers suddenly had a new benchmark: whip-cracking, fedora-tipping, snake-hating Indy.
There's a big snake in the plane, Chuck!
Ford had created a character so compelling, so effortlessly human, that he didn't just star in adventure cinema, he redefined it. And what made Ford's Indy resonate so deeply? Authenticity. Unlike other action heroes of his time, Indiana Jones wasn't about muscles or invincibility. He was about persistence. Ford brought grit to every punch, humor to every fall, and humanity to every triumph. The bruises looked real because they were real. Ford famously insisted on doing as many of his own stunts as possible, even when his age made that decision questionable. Every scar on screen wasn't just Indy's, it was Ford's. Every bead of sweat, every grunt, every weary glance was earned. That commitment to authenticity gave Indiana Jones his soul. You never doubted for a second that Indy was really hanging from that rope bridge, dodging those traps, or running from that boulder. And that's why Ford's refusal to let the character be recast wasn't stubbornness, it was honesty. You can replicate costumes, CGI faces, and even whip cracks. But you can't replicate the intangible, the spark that comes when an actor and character fuse into one. Ford and Indy weren't two separate things. They were a single creation, inseparable and eternal. That's why his final confirmation at 70 carried such weight. It wasn't simply about an ending. It was about protecting what he had built. He wasn't shutting a door. He was safeguarding a legacy. Or, as the truth became clear, the rumors weren't about endings. They were about legacy. And what a legacy it is. 40 years of adventure, 4 decades of inspiring generations to dream of treasure maps and ancient mysteries. A franchise that shaped cinema, influenced culture, and proved that sometimes the greatest heroes aren't flawless. They're vulnerable, funny, and tired, but they keep going anyway. Indy taught us that you don't need to be perfect to be brave. You just need to get back up, dust yourself off, and face the next trap with a crooked smile. Looking back now, the story of Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones is one of rare alignment. An actor and a character meeting at the perfect moment in history, creating something timeless. From Raiders to Dial of Destiny,
Filming for Indiana Jones 5 began earlier this month in the UK. The movie is set to be released.
from daring stunts to heartfelt goodbyes, the journey was more than cinematic. It was personal. For fans, Indy wasn't just a movie hero. He was a friend, a teacher, a reminder that adventure still waits out there if you're willing to chase it. And so the whispers that carried through decades finally resolved into truth. Not a reboot, not a replacement, not a passing of the torch, just a legacy sealed by the man who made it possible. At 70, Harrison Ford finally confirmed the rumors. Indiana Jones would not be rebooted, replaced, or forgotten. Because Indiana Jones isn't just a character. He's Harrison Ford. And that's it from us today. Until next time, thank you for watching.